Good evening, everyone, and greetings from Queens. I just happened to walk past this school building yesterday in Astoria and saw this, so I thought it was perfect for tonight. Put it up here. Before we start, I just want to acknowledge some people who've been particularly helpful along the way in sharing their research, knowledge, and experiences of LGBT life in Queens. City Council member Danny Drom and his archives at the LaGuardia Community College, Richard Schwenthoff, who we just heard from tonight, and his documentary Julio of Jackson Heights, as well as community leaders Brendan Fay at Cederbaum and Andres Duque. If you have information you'd like to share about Queens' history, please email us at info@nyclgbtsites.org, or if share in the Q&A later on. We'd love to hear from you. The majority of our over 300 sites are located in Manhattan, historically the hub of LGBT life and activism, not only for those who live there, but also for those in the outer boroughs and the wider metropolitan area. So it's always great to find more and more sites outside Manhattan that help put the entirety of New York City's queer history into context. This is a selection of some sites we've mapped in the Bronx so far, and we have some ideas for more places to add in the future. Here in Brooklyn, you can see a cluster of sites in Brooklyn Heights, and we know there are more sites to add in Park Slope, especially those connected to lesbian history. The neighborhood of St. George on the northern tip of Staten Island also has a grouping of sites emerging. One of our consultants, Gail Harris, has been conducting outreach with people in Brooklyn and Staten Island and has written several entries for both boroughs. So thank you, Gail. And tonight, of course, we'll be focusing on Queens, which has many more historic sites than this map currently shows, but we're working on it. One of the fun parts of documenting the outer boroughs is that we get to show the public that there is more to the queer community's history than just sites in Manhattan. And for many of us, these are the boroughs where we live or grew up, and that matters. These are less obvious places to look for LGBT history. Even when our project has conducted outreach with community groups in the past, people spoke of bars or community groups in Manhattan they went to after work before coming home to Staten Island or Jackson Heights, for example, and living a more closeted life. And that's the Rockaways on the lower right, if you're curious. But living that closeted life in Jackson Heights gradually began to change. Not for everyone, but the community at large, beginning in the 1990s. Before I focus on Jackson Heights and the 1990s movement, I'm going to take you on a tour of other sites in Queens we've mapped so far. And these are sites that illustrate some of the early queer history of the borough. Each site featured tonight is on our website with longer histories available. So while I'll just be offering up a snapshot of each, I invite you to check out our website for more of the story. Great quarantine reading material. New York City is the literal birthplace of many local and nationally significant figures in LGBT history, and Queens is certainly no exception. In fact, Queens can claim one of the most renowned as its own, Frank Kemeny, who is often considered the father of the national LGBT rights movement. Kemeny lived in this house in Richmond Hill from 1925, the year he was born, until he left for Harvard in 1948. He spent a few years away from home serving during World War II, but would continue to visit his family here until 1979. And we found this yearbook photo of him on Ancestry.com, which is it's fun to find a famous person's yearbook photo. In 1957, Kemeny, then working for the federal government in Washington, D.C., was fired for being gay. He sued, becoming the first to do so on the grounds of sexual orientation, but lost. While his career as a civil servant ended, he became a lifelong LGBT rights activist and just never stopped fighting. He was later credited for having the federal government lift its ban on hiring gay men and lesbians in 1975. 2 years later, he became the first openly gay person to run for Congress. The photo on the left shows him in the 1970 Pride March in Manhattan, the very first the city ever held. Kemeny remained in DC until his death in 2011. Here he is on the left in the Oval Office in June 2009 with President Obama during the signing of a memorandum to extend benefits to same-sex partners of federal employees. This unassuming house in Flushing was the longtime home of Jean and Jules Manford, important early allies of the LGBT community and their children, including gay rights activist Morty Manford, living here from the 1950s until Jean sold the house in 1996. In 1972, Jean responded to a New York Post article about a gay rights event where her son was beaten with a letter to the editor that included this now famous line, "I have a homosexual son and I love him." This set in motion her decision to walk with Morty in the 1972 Pride March in Manhattan. In this iconic photo, she holds a sign that reads, "Parents of gays, unite in support for our children," which caught the attention of queer youth who begged Jean to talk to their parents. As a result, Jean and her husband Jules founded Parents of Gays the following year as a support group for straight parents of gay children, the first such group in the nation. The group became known as PFLAG and grew to include chapters all over the country. Jean continued to be active with PFLAG, even helping to establish a chapter in Queens before her death in 2013. That same year, her daughter Suzanne accepted the Presidential Citizens Medal on her mother's behalf. A year later, the Flushing block on which the Manfords lived was co-named in their honor. Older New Yorkers likely remember the murder of Kitty Genovese in 1964, who lived in this Kew Gardens apartment building the last year of his life. Genovese, who worked at a bar in Hollis, quickly became a symbol of bystander apathy after a sensational and largely untrue New York Times article said that 37 bystanders witnessed her murder outside her apartment building, but did nothing. Genovese became so associated with her murder that little was known about who she was in life. It looks like we have scribble on the screen and I'm not sure how to get rid of it. So sorry about that. I mean, I'll just keep going because I don't think it's. Anyway, for our project, we wanted to highlight an aspect of Genovese's life that she had to hide because of the times she lived in. A year before her murder, Genovese met Marianne Delanco at the Swing Rendezvous, a lesbian bar in Greenwich Village. They became a couple and moved to the Kew Gardens apartment together, where they were known as roommates. Delanco later said, "Being a gay woman in that society was very hard, so we were in the closet a lot. In fact, her family didn't know. I mean, they know now, but there was denial there. It was very hard then." This, to me, also highlighted the sad realization that while she was grieving her girlfriend's death, she also had to publicly hide that grief as well.
Amanda, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Do us a favor, unshare and then reshare your screen so that we can clear what the scribble that happened.
Sure, no problem.
Sorry about that, everyone.
I'm glad it can be fixed. You good? Yeah, okay. So Queens is also home to one of the few historic professional sports venues left in New York City. The West Side Tennis Club in Forest Hills was the home of the US Open for nearly 60 years until it moved to its current location in 1978. Our website highlights the connections that Bill Tilden, Billie Jean King, Martina Navratilova, and Queens native Renee Richards have to this location. In 1977, for example, Richards became the first trans woman to compete in a professional tennis tournament. This was after she had to sue to gain entry when the rules were suddenly changed to make chromosome tests mandatory for female entrants, which had never been required before. In Flushing Meadows, the New York State Pavilion still stands as a remnant from the 1964 World's Fair. The pavilion itself was designed by architect Philip Johnson, one of 2 gay architects we've featured on our website so far. 4 prominent gay artists also had their work featured at the fair. Andy Warhol's controversial 13 Most Wanted Men was installed on the Theaterama, but was shortly after painted over because of its subversively homoerotic content. The Theaterama also featured art installations by Roy Lichtenstein, and Ellsworth Kelly and Robert Indiana. The most eastern end of Reese Park Beach in the Rockaways has had a historically queer presence since at least the 1940s. Known affectionately as Gay Beach or Street Beach, this isolated section of the beach provided the LGBT community with a popular gathering place and cruising ground. It also provided groups like the Gay Activists Alliance with a public space to encourage voter registration, timely, in the pre-social media age, or play softball. Prominent gay rights activist Barbara Giddings is in the bathing suit on the lower right of the softball team photo, for those who know who Giddings is. And I hope you do. She's on our website. By the 1960s, the beach also became popular with queer, Black, and Latino people. David Boltz is someone who reached out to us with this photo of his longtime partner, Felix, standing in the Carmen Miranda outfit, and his friends at the beach. One of the great things about our website is that it's a living document of LGBT history, and we can keep adding new information and photos as we learn about them. And so now I want to hone in on Jackson Heights, a neighborhood that has been home to LGBT people since the 1920s, when a population boom included a significant number of Broadway theater artists who were attracted to the convenient subway commute from Times Square to the quiet, newly built residential enclave. After the opening of LaGuardia Airport, gay travelers and flight attendants waited out layovers by visiting a small entertainment district on 37th Avenue. In Richard Spontoff's documentary, Julio of Jackson Heights, several older gay residents talk about a more closeted neighborhood. One man mentions a 1950s bar called the Flora Dora on Roosevelt Avenue, the commercial street underneath the elevated 7 train. That was patronized by gay people, but with limitations. One man, for example, was, quote, dressed in a way, quote, that he was told to leave and never come again for fear that the place would be closed down. Bar closures for this reason was a common issue at the time, even in Manhattan. And this bar on the building on the right, Evolution, which is currently a gay bar, I believe that was the location of Flora Dora, but that's something to look into. There is evidence of gay activists and social groups meeting in Jackson Heights and the surrounding area in the 1970s and 80s. But there were 2 events that really catalyzed the LGBT rights movement forward in a much more publicly visible way. The first was the gay and racially biased murder of Julio Rivera by 3 white skinheads in July of 1990. Rivera was of Puerto Rican descent and had recently moved to the neighborhood from the Bronx when he was brutally attacked in the PS 69 schoolyard at the corner of 78th Street and 37th Avenue. This was not the first gay biased attack in Queens, but it was the first time that the gay community took a stand against homophobic hate crimes in the borough. The Anti-Violence Project and Queer Nation helped organize a candlelight vigil in Jackson Heights, with planning largely taking place at the Magic Touch, a neighborhood gay bar. This was considered the first successful gay public demonstration in Queens and was significant in expanding LGBT activism beyond Manhattan and connecting activists in both boroughs. Rivera's case in court ultimately became the first gay hate crime to be tried in New York State. Realizing the importance of advocating for LGBT equality in their own neighborhoods, local groups such as Queens Gays and Lesbians United, QGLU, also formed. The other big event to inspire a more public call for equality in Queens was the homophobic outcry to the Children of the Rainbow public school program, which was introduced by the Board of Education in 1991. The program was in response to the racially motivated murder of a Black man in Brooklyn in 1989 and was meant to teach first graders respect for all of the city's diverse communities. We're using the March for Truth in Ridgewood to help tell this story. A portion of the 443-page document focused on varying family structures, including 3 pages on families headed by same-sex parents. Among a list of hundreds of recommended but not required reading material were 3 LGBT-related books: Heather Has 2 Mommies, Daddy's Roommate, and Gloria Goes to Gay Pride. Mary Cummins, the well-known ultra-conservative school board president of District 24, which included the neighborhoods of Maspeth and Ridgewood, began publicly attacking the program for its LGBT content, and spread lies about it that reached other parts of the city. Gay teachers were accused of being child molesters. In response, the Anti-Violence Project worked with Queens Gays and Lesbians United to organize the March for Truth in March of 1993, running on Myrtle Avenue in Ridgewood. Gay groups came from all over the city, including groups from the Bronx, which created this informational ad on the right. The Children of the Rainbow curriculum did not move forward, but even more people as a result were getting involved in the push for gay equality in Queens. The Community United Methodist Church in Jackson Heights, already an inclusive church since the mid-1970s, became an important meeting spot for the 1990s push for equality. For one, this is where Q-Glue met shortly after Ed Cederbaum began the idea of the group in his nearby apartment. Howard Cruz, a prominent gay comic book artist and Ed's husband, created the illustrations you see here in the first Queens Pride Guide. Q-Glue's co-founder, Susan Kost, recalled that the group's goal was to be an active voice for local issues in a way that larger organizations in Manhattan could not always be. The group worked with the Anti-Violence Project to improve relations between the LGBT community and the 115th Police Precinct by developing a training program for police officers, for example. The idea for the first Queens Pride was proposed by Danny Drum, the now city council member, who at the time was a school teacher in District 24, the center of the Children of the Rainbow controversy, which inspired him to come out of the closet and become more politically active. He proposed the idea for Queens Pride at this church. He and the Cuban-born LGBT rights activist Maritza Martinez co-chaired the Queens Lesbian and Gay Pride Committee, which formed to plan Queens' very first Pride March. And it was the first Pride March outside Manhattan in New York City to form, and inspired the ones that would come in Brooklyn and the Bronx. The inaugural parade kicked off on June 6, 1993, and ran along 37th Avenue from 89th to 75th Streets. The event was billed as a parade and multicultural festival with the goal of being a family-friendly affair to counter the homophobic backlash to the Children of the Rainbow program and also show the wider Jackson Heights community that, as Drum later noted, lesbians and gay men were their family, friends, and neighbors. Activists at this time understood that becoming publicly visible was an important step in the fight for LGBT equality. Martinez spoke to the crowd, saying in Spanish, "We know that many gay and lesbian Latinos live here in Queens. This is the moment with this parade to come out of the closet and demonstrate that we are Latinos and gays." Beginning in the 1970s, Latino immigrants arrived in Jackson Heights in large numbers and is a demographic that continues there to this day. Many slides in this section feature the photos of Richard Schwenthoff, thank you, Richard, and come from the first 3 years of parades. Here is Q-Glue and men of all colors together marching in the early years. And here's Jean Manford, again, serving as Grand Marshal in the inaugural 1993 parade. There's also a post office now in Jackson Heights that is named for her. These are 3 transgender performers from Club Yamada, which is no longer in business, but the building is still there. And if anyone has memories of this place, please let us know. We'd love to add it to the map. Drag queens and trans performers played a pivotal role in helping to raise funds and promote the parade beforehand at the local queer bars where they regularly entertained. The parade celebrated the borough's diversity through the participation of such groups as SALGA, the South Asian Lesbian and Gay Association, and Las Buenas Amigas. Jackson Heights has large Indian and Latino populations, and so the visibility of these groups to queer or questioning youth watching from the sidelines would certainly have had a significant impact, especially in these pre-internet days. And finally, this is just a nice shot from the Multicultural Festival on nearby 37th Road. Martinez planned the festival while Drum was in charge of the parade route. Latino bars in the neighborhood played an important role in sponsoring the parade and helping to fundraise. Friends Tavern on Roosevelt Avenue opened in 1989 and is considered the oldest operating gay bar in Queens. It sponsored the Multicultural Festival at the inaugural Queens Pride. Neighborhood bars and clubs have historically played an important role in the lives of queer Latino immigrants. For Latinos, these nightlife spaces reflected the dance-driven cultures of their native countries, but also provided an openly gay atmosphere that, for many, was not available back home. Shortly after LGBT rights activist and journalist Andrés Duque emigrated from Colombia in 1993, he went to Friends and saw Colombian men kissing and dancing together, which he called, quote, a revelation of his life and his gay life. Eddie Valentin, co-owner of Friends and other gay area bars, called Roosevelt Avenue, quote, the gay village for Latinos. And this is where a vigil was held for the victims of the Pulse nightclub shooting in 2016. Some of the victims had once lived in Jackson Heights or frequented bars here. Boom Boom Bar was a popular gay-owned and operated Latina lesbian bar that also provided support for the inaugural Queens Pride. It closed in 2018, but was located on Roosevelt Avenue in nearby Woodside. The bar had a float in Queens Pride, and the space itself attracted a mixed, but mostly working class Latina lesbian crowd from the early 1990s until its closing. It was until then only one of 4 lesbian bars still operating in New York City. And of course, now the pandemic has added new struggles to that fight. The bar was also a gathering space for volunteer-based social and political groups like Coleja or the Colombian Lesbian and Gay Association, co-founded by Andrés Duque. Guillermo Vasquez was an important Colombian-born activist who helped organize the first Queens Pride Parade. I should say my mom came to Queens as a little girl from Colombia with her family and settled in Middle Village in 1964. So seeing all these Colombian names pop up during our documentation of the neighborhood has been personally meaningful. And it was a Colombia soccer jersey in the back, if anyone spotted that. Vasquez was part of the parade's planning committee and helped engage Spanish-speaking participants in the event. He also spoke about the importance of the Queens LGBT community becoming politically active, as is highlighted in this quote. It is important to send a message to politicians that there are large numbers of us in Queens. Queens is coming out of the closet. He was also highly involved in fighting for the rights of Latino immigrants and served or founded a number of Latino-based organizations in the borough. Vasquez was also an important figure during the AIDS crisis, and through the gay men's health crisis, served as the coordinator of community outreach, spending many evenings educating people about HIV/AIDS. The Department of Health cited Jackson Heights as the neighborhood with the greatest concentration of at-risk gay Latinos. Vasquez appeared most often at a gay Latino bar called the Love Boat at the corner of 77th Street and Broadway on the Elmhurst-Jackson Heights border. This is where a street sign in his memory was placed after his untimely death from AIDS. The bar was known for its lively dance scene that attracted a diverse group of Latinos and was located here from about 1985 to 1995. And there was a gay bar before it called Our Place that we don't know too much about. If anyone happens to know, we'd love to hear about it. The Love Boat helped fundraise for the inaugural Queens Pride and sponsored a block along the route, which you can see here from the 1993 Pride Guide between 78th and 79th Street on 37th Avenue. And I'm going to end with 2 sites that show the continuing history of LGBT Queens, and then we'll head to a Q&A. Building on his work with QGLU and his role as a former caseworker for the city's Department of Social Services, among other involvements, Ed Cederbaum became the founding director of Queen Sage, a national service and care group for LGBT elders. He opened the chapter in the basement of St. Andrew's Episcopal Church in Astoria in October of 1995. Here's Ed with a group of men from Queen Sage, which had an important role of bringing gay men and women out of isolation. Cederbaum's goal was to provide senior citizens with the ability to engage with one another, since they were a group that grew up in a time when being openly gay was especially dangerous, and so were conditioned to not discuss this aspect of their lives. And he talks about the importance of older people being able to talk about their own memories, which would be harder in a room full of straight people where they may not feel comfortable doing that. which I thought was a really thought-provoking and beautiful quote that we have on the website. Social events were frequently planned at this space until at least 1999. 10 years later, the Ali Forney Center opened a shelter here for homeless queer youth. And you can see some more illustrations by Howard Cruz, including this one, the Lavender latkes and Latka Mania. And finally, the third Queen's March featured on our website is the St. Pat's for All Parade, which has taken place in the historically Irish neighborhoods of Sunnyside and Woodside since 2000, which is the cutoff year for our project, so it just makes it in. The parade was founded by LGBT rights activist Brendan Fay, an immigrant from Ireland who was fired from his Queen's school teaching position for marching as an openly gay man in the St. Patrick's Day Parade on Fifth Avenue in 1991. St. Pat's for All was designed to be inclusive of all Irish people, especially queer Irish people who were banned from marching openly in the Fifth Avenue Parade. And on the right, behind the Immigration Aisle, Emerald Isle Immigration Center, is Father Michael, who was the first official victim of the 9/11 terror attacks. And we've just recently added the St. Francis Friary, where he lived in Manhattan, to our website to tell more of his story. And this is a photo from 2016 showing the parade still going strong and encouraging diverse participation in its celebrations. And these are just some more sites we have in the pipeline. We know maybe a little about or a lot more about. We just need to get around to writing them. So if any of these you happen to know something about or have photos and would like to share with us, we would love, again, to learn about those and see those. It's a group effort to get these on the map, especially if they're not written about in books. Becomes really an oral history. So yeah, that concludes this part of the presentation. And I'm just going to end right here with a little announcement from Ken, or I guess I can also do it. We have these gay shirts that are available on our website. This is the original poster from the 1970 Pride March in Manhattan, and we've made a t-shirt out of it. And so we're selling them as a part of a fundraiser for our organization. And you can also follow us on social media and visit our website and all that good stuff. So we're going to open it up now to Q&A.
Thanks, Amanda. And thanks everybody for participating and listening. I just want to add that, you know, LGBT history is American history, and that oftentimes people who are living through history don't realize their own records are important or their own photographs are important. So for example, I like to say, what you think is your snapshot is our archival photograph. And we did a presentation actually in Queens for this Queens Sage group about 2 or 3 years ago. And I was discussing the Paradise Garage and how we were documenting it. And this guy jumped up and said, "I'll be right back." And he lived about 5 minutes away. He came back with his ID card from the Paradise Garage, which I photographed and we put on our website, and subsequently was in a museum exhibition at the Museum of the City, at the New York Historical Society. So for the people who have artifacts, information, the archival record that you have is really important. And please let us know if you have any information about sites that Amanda had on that, that list there, or other locations or other ways you can help us document more fully the diversity of our community, especially outside of Manhattan. We really want to show that there was a life going on and people were living their lives and outside of that. But if anyone has questions, please enter them in the chat. I also want to acknowledge Brendan Fay is in our presence now, and he may want to add something about you know, his participation and his role. And I believe it's Helen Rosenthal. I believe, if I can't tell, but is this the City Council, Helen Rosenthal, or not? If so, thank you for joining us, or if not, thank you for joining us as well. But it's wonderful to have a full range of individuals to look at the work we're doing, really to make sure that people understand the value of this. Before I go on any longer, I'll just say, we're documenting tangible heritage. These are physical spaces that you have a visceral connection to, but the intangible benefits are really important. Intangible benefits of pride, continuity, identity, where a kid who feels alone can go onto our website and see a location and see this history and know that they're part of a continuum of something and that they're not alone. So I'll leave it at that. Are there any questions, or does anyone want to sort of unmute? Does anyone want to give us some site suggestions?
Ken, I'll share a question from the chat. Is there documentation of LGBT life in the Rockaways besides Reese Park?
Amanda can add to that. Not that we have right now. I'm not sure if we have a database. Our website has about 300 fully documented sites. We have another database that has about 300 plus that we're researching, that we may have a location, we don't have an address. Amanda, I don't know if there's anything on the database.
I put the ones here on this slide are the ones that we have that felt like, yeah, so we don't have anything from the Rockaways other than Reese Beach. We'd love to, we'd love to, but not currently.
So for those who may have joined late, Amanda, can you again explain the garment behind you and its significance for you personally for the talk tonight?
It's the uniform of the Colombian soccer team. I've had this since the 2014 World Cup, and my mother moved to Queens as a little girl with her family from Colombia, and grew up in Queens. So I just wanted to bring that connection to the presentation tonight.
I think Leonard Magnus, you wanted to discuss Sundance doing some events in Queens. What do we?
Yeah. I joined Sundance in 1980. Sundance was a gay and lesbian organization that felt that, at least for its memberships, gay life was far too much involved in indoor activities. And that's why we formed Sundance Outdoor Adventure Society, which eventually had a membership of about 900 people. And we did a lot of stuff in Queens. One of our tours was a 5-park bicycle tour attended by about 35 people and led by a gentleman named Martin Friedman and his partner. And that was pretty exciting. We didn't know about some of these parks, even though I lived in Queens and lived right near where Kitty Genovese was murdered in 1964. But we went there. We went to the Queens waterfront. We went to that new area where this $1 billion water treatment facility was built and had several bicycle paths going around it. We also went to the Alice, whatever the heck it was, in Staten Island as a group.
Awesome. Yeah.
Right, yeah. And we did hundreds of other events. I'm probably forgetting a whole bunch of them, but we really toured Queens, very thoroughly and fairly often. So we did. Maybe others have forgotten Queens, but we didn't.
I want to just say, one of the things that we're working on is getting National Register listings, which is the federal register of recognizing historic sites. And anecdotally, we tried to get the Manford House listed, and that's in Queens. It's where PFLAG was founded, really important location. And in my conversation, we need owner consent, which means the owner of the building has to consent before it can get listed. And I went back and forth with the owner, and finally, she got on the phone with me after her daughter said her mother will speak with me. And she said, look, I've lived here, for the last 20 years or so. I don't want to be known as the gay house. You already have a plaque on the street. Isn't it enough for you people? And at that point, I was like, okay, this is going nowhere. But it really shows you, A, people's confusion with what it means to be listed on the National Register, which is just honorific, and B, that homophobia is alive and well and living in our wonderful liberal, city. That said, I want to give the opportunity to Councilmember Rosenthal if she wants us to add any comments or say hello or not. I don't want to put you on the spot, or if Brendan Fay wants to say anything tonight. And Shep, I want to just acknowledge you as well, because I see you here. You're the zealot of all of our presentations. So,
Well, I defer to Brendan to go first. He's the hero in this story. So you go, Brendan, and then I'll pull up the rear.
Wow. Well, I first of all, how moved I am that to be sitting here in Queens and listening and watching the story of our people just unfold. And I can't thank you enough for the work that you do. It is so moving. It is so beautiful. I remember when I arrived first as an immigrant, and it's like pushing against the silence and the invisibility, not only of our own lives, but also in schools, and where LGBT young people are wondering, what is our story? Do we have a past? Do we have a heritage? And of course, we are everywhere. I often say that there are stories just waiting to be unwrapped and told everywhere in every century, because we are everywhere and we have always been. So I can't thank you enough. It's very moving for me because personally that I lived so much of my life with a sense of just invisibility. And so this is very moving, and you so beautifully and movingly presented, and it's so accessible. So profound thanks for that. Of course, right behind me here, I have, there's so many stories, but this, one of the first films I did, this is of Robert Reiger, who grew up here in Astoria, you know, and who was one of the first openly gay persons to run for office in New York City. He ran for the assembly in Greenwich Village, but he became a leader in ACT UP, and a well-known leader and a manager of the office. And Robert died from AIDS in 94. I often tell people about my experience going from Queens when we marched as Irish LGBT people with Mayor David Dinkins, Ruth Messenger, and other city officials who were willing to walk with us, that Robert Reiger grabbed me by the hand and sort of carried me up the avenue as people were screaming and roaring. And so here's why I tell this story is that's the gift of activism, reaching out to others and carrying each other by the hand through hate and prejudice. And I've never forgotten that moment. And then of course, his father, Stanley, after Robert died in 94, took the megaphone, his megaphone from ACT UP, in the church right here in Queens at Precious Blood, and said, Robert Reiger, my son, who is gay and died from AIDS, and then declared his love for his son right here in his home parish in Queens. And I often say we are all activists together. You know, sometimes we throw that word on, but we all are, and that's so moving. And so the first film I made was called Remembering Robert, and it was his parents, Kathleen, an Irish immigrant, and his father, a well-known musician. That's just Robert. And there's so many beautiful stories, and I'm very moved with yours here. In I'll just say 2000, and we were doing lots, of course, before that, in the 90s, and I was so inspired to meet so many people here from Queens. By the way, the first bar I ever went to was the Magic Touch when I arrived here, and I was studying at St. John's, and I remember I used to go to the Liffey bar, which was the Irish bar, to hang out with the Irish, and then I would run up the street to the Magic Touch. And you know, so, and there's so many stories there. And one of the beautiful gems that I know I shared with you guys was a priest from Pennsylvania who just died last year. And someone said, do you want to have a look at his papers, his files? And next was all of these folders, how in 1974, he went from Pennsylvania and settled in Astoria, Queens, as a priest who was gay and was trying to find himself, and asked permission to have this leave. And he found the Queens Gay Activist Alliance, and they inspired him to accept himself. And next, he begins writing to politicians and joining the campaigns. So that's Dan McCarthy. And let me say, I'll finish with this one, is the St. Pat's for All parade. This issue had gone all the way to the United States Supreme Court, who said that parades have a right to exclude whomsoever they wish. And I remember sitting down with Danny Drum and Ellen Duncan in a Woodside restaurant and said, I have an idea. Why can't we have a parade in Queens that will become known for its spirit of welcome? And that was in March 2000, we began organizing. And in a way, the people of Queens created this beautiful movement of hospitality, inclusion, diversity, and welcome. And of course, leading it for us were Robert Reiger's parents, you know, Kathleen and Stanley, who carried the front banner. And I'm very proud of that movement, and I'm very grateful for it. But you know, I'm actually hoping, if anybody's interested in joining me on this, to have a street in Astoria where Robert grew up and lived, and his father, who just died in just this last December, to have a street named in their memory. Because let me just say, thank you for showing the street signs, and I'll end with this one. They are also markers and where we get to tell our stories. And I know you all have a special role in bringing this about, and thank you for that. And I look forward to being in touch with you and helping you in any way I can with other stories.
That sounds like his childhood home would be something to add to the Astoria home. With
yes.
Yeah, I can talk to you later about that, because to our website, at least that,
Sure.
yeah, that would be wonderful.
Sure.
And Brendan, it turns out you have a council member in the room, so I can help with the street sign naming.
Wow.
I can be helpful with that, but it's just an honor to be here with you. I'm listening and learning. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Brendan. Thank you, Councilmember Rosenthal.
Thank you.
Are there any other people who want to provide us with sites? You can always sort of suggest, oh, and I'll have to mute myself. I wanted to say hello to Councilmember Drum and see if you'd like to make any comments.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, that's great. This is so wonderful. And I'm so happy to see that you are discussing what happened in the outer boroughs. But it's really important. And I think that the history of the movement in Queens is very different than what happened in Manhattan. Although there are some similarities, but you know, the killing of Julio Rivera, the Children of the Rainbow curriculum were the things that really spurred the movement on in Queens. Of course, I had the pleasure of working with Brendan Fay from the get-go. Brendan was in the front row with the banner on the very first parade. And we very specifically picked people to carry that banner: Latinos, immigrants, transgender, which was actually pretty forward-thinking at that time. You know, and so we really wanted to make sure that we had great representation of the makeup of the county of Queens as well. And in many ways, Queens Pride is different than Manhattan Pride, because I think that one of the things that you see if you come to Queens Pride is all the families that sit along the street on the curb, and they bring their kids, and gay and straight and everything else. And, you know, as the Colombian group goes by, they cheer the Colombian group on. And as the Dominican group, the Dominicans are happy. And the South Asian groups, it's a really special place, Jackson Heights. And the history of Queens is really special. I'm going to let you in on a little secret that most people may not know, but I see you have the cruising sites. And many people don't know that I was a towel boy at the Northern Men's Sauna in Flushing. I needed money.
I think we have that note actually from you.
I needed money to get my master's degree, and I had to work extra time. I was working in a daycare center at the time, and you know, daycare does not pay. So I worked on weekends and sometimes at nights at the Northern Men's Sauna. So it's good to see it there. just went up for sale about 2 weeks ago. And so even that is now gone. But this is great. Thank you. Congratulations. And I want to keep supporting the LGBT Historic Sites Project, particularly because you're also working in our schools in the New York City Department of Education, which is huge. You know, I came out as a gay teacher and never dreamed that we would get to the point where we would be able to have programs like this in our public school system. So keep up the good work. Amanda, Ken, everybody. Is Jerry there? Not Jerry. Yeah,
Jay.
Jerry, right?
Jay.
Jay, I mean, I'm sorry, Jay. Yeah, Jay?
Yep.
He's there? Okay.
In the Brady Bunch screen that I see, he's right above you. So.
Oh, wait a minute. I don't have the full site here. I gotta.
Danny, thank you so much for attending. I was hoping you were going to.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I actually had another guy that's doing in North Carolina a little bit of a what do you call it? A parody on songs. A guy named Mark Crawford Levitt down in North Carolina to support the Democratic governor down there where it's so needed. So I'm kind of a little bit back and forth between the two of them, but I did not want to miss this. So I hope you can continue to do more Queens things.
Definitely, yeah.
You know, we have a lot of queens and queens who will appreciate it. That's for sure.
You have a lot more history to add.
If I could just do a little bit commercial, all of the virtual presentations that we've been doing ever since COVID started are all up on YouTube. So we have a lot of wonderful ones. I did 2 on early GAA actions. Amanda did one on Cafe Chino. So please check those out if you hadn't been able to attend them in person, because they're all up.
Jay, I had a question for you. If I don't know if I don't want to put you on the spot. Are any of the schools, the public schools in the city in Queens, named after any LGBT people that you know, such as we've done Bayard Rustin and?
I'd have to go back to look at my list, but when Danny got us our first grant to do them, Amanda, didn't I find like 24?
Yeah, I just was wondering if anyone.
Yeah, you did.
I'm almost positive there are ones in every borough.
Yeah.
Leonardo da Vinci.
So they're definitely
In the middle of District 24 too.
I think it's Ed Cederbaum coming to the room. Is that correct, Ed? If you'd like to say some words. No pressure though, if you don't want to.
We're working on getting him in, but he's not right now. We'll let you know.
Oh, okay. I thought he just came in.
Yeah, I
It's
see.
also,
We have a lot of late entrants too.
yeah, also
Like
if Caroline
Lisa Davis?
Passion's still on with the question of the Rockaways, she did a whole project and was involved
Oh,
in
that was Carolyn?
in a documentary on the bungalows of Far Rockaway. I don't know
wow.
if you found out anything.
I guess it's one of those things where you know the history is there. It's just a way of finding it. And if the building still exists, that's always the roller coaster of being a site
We're
project.
looking at extant sites, build physical locations, even though we are tracking those that have demolished. I think Ed is unmuted if he'd like to say anything. We presented some information about you, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but we certainly want to have more information.
Well, absolutely. Hello. And I'm really looking forward to knowing what wonderful things you did. I never got my link. Nobody ever sent it to me. So I only just now got on through a link that somebody sent me. So I haven't seen it yet, but people are sending me messages about it and they're enjoying it. So if they're enjoying it, you know, that's what matters.
Well, we will have this available on YouTube. So.
Oh, this won't be up there? Great. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
The whole world has to know about me, you know.
That's true.
As they should. Yeah, we basically talked about Queens Gays and Lesbians United and their work there and at Queen Sage and some of the things you and I had spoken about over the phone. And I think there's some other things that we'd love to talk to you about, some more sites, such as your residence with Howard and Jackson Heights. We'd love to add that to the map. But if there are things that you'd like to share tonight with people, that would be great.
Oh, do I get a cut on the admission price to this historic site? Just kidding.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Tonight's event was free, so you can have 100%.
Oh, thank you very much.
We're so generous, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I want to just tell you that how surprising it is to me that I live in a world where things like this are ordinarily available. I mean, this is not the world that I was born into as a gay person. So, you know, God bless everybody who has done something to make us come to the point that we're at, so that fat old people like me can sit around and relax and enjoy a little freedom. And please keep up all the work, because the culture is as important as the politics.
Thank you. Thanks. And let's
Okay.
be vigilant, considering what's going on throughout the world in terms of LGBT rights. Shep, you have a hand raised, I believe. Do you have a question? Is he unmuted yet?
Just a moment.
Yeah,
Hi, Shep.
yeah. I just want to make a comment that the Boom Boom Room was also used as a fundraiser for the gay games.
Oh, great.
We can
That's
have
it, yeah.
that. Thank you.
Thank you.
And,
We're always trying.
And I had a boyfriend in Kew Gardens. That matters.
That is part of our what we
I
call our
know.
scholarly research.
Exactly.
You know, I want to say something to Councilmember Drum's point earlier about the school programs. We did last year 20 presentations in middle and high schools in New York, and you know, and it was really interesting. I mean, I fortunately, you know, I did a lot of, you know, I bet 7 of them, and I was sort of amazed because I haven't been in a classroom since 1979 in high school, to see how sophisticated some of these kids were in the New York City school system, and how the funny part of it, not funny, but first we had to sort of present why memorials and historic sites are important, but we also then had to present information why discrimination was really an issue before, you know, why we were talking about things. So we had to put in incidences to show them that you can get arrested for being gay, for cruising someone on the street, because no one understood, like, why would the cop arrest you? Why couldn't you go to a bar? So it was really interesting just on that level. And then this year, because we couldn't do it in person, our consultant did it virtually. And that, you know, is another tool like this to really convey to the school system. So hopefully the schools are going to continue in this educational mode. But as we all know, we didn't really get this when we were kids, and just think how helpful it would have been. So thank you.
And to that point, in some of the classroom visits that I did in the outer boroughs, when they had laptops in the classroom and we were able to show them our website, the kids were fascinated that there were neighborhood sites that they could go and visit that they may have seen every day that they did not know
Right.
the hidden history of. So it's part of, obviously, our project is all site-based, but it really made a connection with some of those kids.
And I also wanted to point out that it's great for straight students to see as well, because they're a part of the dialogue, and their generation's just getting better and better at, you know, understanding. So I think when we present this history, we present it to all the students and everyone who listens. So.
Yeah, that was true in my presentation in Staten Island, where this guy was making out basically with his girlfriend during the Gay Straight Alliance. And he perked up when I started talking about ACT UP. And he's like, oh my God, that's really cool that people protested like that. I was like, yay, we got him engaged. So.
Oh, yeah, and also there's a straight student who she said her father was gay, and she had no idea the kinds of things that he had to deal with. Learning about Julius Mississippi, he wasn't involved in that, but understanding what was happening at gay bars. So that was another layer that I thought was interesting.
So I'm gonna.
I was gonna say it's been a long struggle since the days of Children of the Rainbow, right, Ed and Brendan? And I have to tell you, probably the thing that I'm most proud of in my tenure as a council member was being able to get the funding for, you know, for the programs that we have in the Department of Ed. I never thought we would see that, it's amazing. Did you guys ever highlight oh my gosh, when the lesbian, what was it, went to the school during Children of the Rainbow? Ed, do you remember the group? I'm trying to think.
Lesbian Avengers.
Lesbian Avengers, right, Richard, went to the school, and they were handing out balloons, gay rights are for everyone. And the mothers were grabbing the balloons and popping them, and and the kids are, no, mommy, give me that balloon,
Remember which school?
Huh?
You remember which school it was?
I think it was PS.
I have that information. I think PS 88, it was the one that was the district office at the time. I think it is
87.
87.
87. And this was part of the Children of the Rainbow.
Yeah,
Fight, related to?
Dyke TV has it. They filmed it, and but it's just fascinating to see how those mothers jump to pull those balloons away from the kids. So sick.
I'll send you the links, Amanda.
Okay, great. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
If I can, one thing I just want to talk about for people who didn't see me, a lot of people here know me, but I'm Richard Spuntoff. I was the photographer of the parade for its first 20 years, and I have a long history documenting. And I grew up in the neighborhood. And one of the things that is really fascinating to me is having grown up in the neighborhood, literally a block and a half from Vaseline Alley. Everyone, what was so fascinating was everyone in the neighborhood knew there was a big LGBTQ community, but no one would talk about it.
Yeah.
And the thing that was so wild is, when I think about it, is when I got in my teen years and I'd go out, and you're kind of clueless about everything. And if I were going out at night, my mother would say, "Be careful walking by 37th Road." And I'd be, "Why?" And she'd said, "Well, because gay men have been murdered there." And what was so interesting is that I started researching was most of these things were not in the paper. So it was interesting that there were murders there, and people in the neighborhood, and they were not explained in the papers. And yet, here you have this straight mom who knew that, of course, if a man was found murdered there, it was a gay man, because people are going to beat up and murder people on the cruising strip. Yeah. So it was fascinating. And really, the period where Danny and Eddie and Brendan, Maritza, and many other people were working, 1990 to 93, was just such a powerful period of change in the neighborhood. And it's exciting to watch, NYC LGBT sites excavating a lot of things that up till now have been kind of more oral history, and turning into something where we have the solid sites. And I'm going to throw out, before I shut my mouth, a challenge, maybe to Danny and a few other people. So there's this mythic place, this mythic moving after hours bar that everyone has told me about, called Frida's, that did not have a location.
I was in Frida's many a night till 8 in the morning.
You told me it moved. It was a moving after hours place. I don't know if they could document.
Oh, it was great. It was a lot of fun. A lot of fun. Yep. There was another one called the 4-0 Club on Broadway and 74th, in that area there. And you had to go, I think it was upstairs, if I'm not mistaken. And I had a leather bomber jacket, and I gave it to the coat check. My keys were in the pocket, but when I went to leave, somebody had taken my leather bomber jacket with my keys in it, and I couldn't get into my apartment. So,
my God.
Yeah, many memories.
Well, we should try to capture all of these, because all of these fill out this cultural landscape of LGBT history in Queens, and it adds to the texture and flavor of these sites. So if you have any sites, please email us, or we should follow up with Ed, Danny, and Richard. Thank you all for coming. I want to be cognizant of the time. If you have any suggestions, comments, please email us at ken@nyclgbtsites.org, or you could find Amanda or any of us from the project. Thanks so much for joining us and participating and your support. So thank you. And yay, Amanda, brava.
Thanks everyone for joining.
Take care.